Honestly, until my mid-20s, I was surprised often to see a Korean face looking back at me.
Here we are at Project Red. Today we have one of my really special friends, Brian Shun.
It's both creative and critical thinking put together. And I learned at a young age that I could do it, but I didn't realize until my 20s that that was actually something that was valuable to people. I'm like, well, first I do this part of my brain, and then I do this part of my brain. I was frustrated with him as a young guy. I'm like, why can't you do these things? And he said, Brian, most people can't switch hemispheres like you do. I was like, what do you mean by that? And he said, most people, they're either creative or they're analytical, and usually they're not both. And I had to sit back and think about it because I had just been so used to being me.
All right, here we are at Project Red. Oh my gosh, we've done several of these now, and it's been a joy to have all these incredible guests join us. Yeah. Patrick, Will McGinniss, and today we have one of my really special friends, Brian Shun, in the studio today, and you are not going to believe this guy. So much in this one person here, and we are going to try to get to it all. It's going to be amazing. I first met Brian, a friend of mine, Tyler Ring, said, "Hey, you need to connect with this guy." And when Brian showed up at the coffee shop here in Franklin, Tennessee, where we're at, he had his little backpack. It was so cool. Had his jeans, his cool tees, his vibe going on, his long, beautiful black hair, and he set a Lego on the table, and he said, "I'll tell you about that later." So you'll have to tell them about that later. So there's the tease. But Brian is going to be amazing. But we want to start with Brian just sharing with us. Tell us all about you. You know, if you were to kind of give a synopsis, or I don't want to say the elevator pitch, but that's kind of the idea. But we want it to be real and transparent and honest, and who you are, and what's your heartbeat, and just what moves you, what drives you, and to the different kinds of work that you do, just as you've moved through your young life already.
Okay. If you go back to the Lego example,
yeah,
I love Legos.
Amazing.
Everything that I do is Legos. I want to try to find creative ways to put things together. It's problem solving. It's, being creative musically, right? There's always something. How can these two things connect? And so I love learning. I love to teach people also about what I've learned and help them connect the dots on things, right? So every type of work that I do is always about connecting two things that may not be like together.
That's amazing.
Or finding kind of that continuity between things. So I love that space of kind of standing up in ambiguity.
I love that. Wow. Give people like an overview of like a context of like all the things that what you just said fits in.
Sure. A lot of it will kind of go around strategic work. It'll go around also understanding, like turning data into information, right?
Okay.
Oftentimes, like for data's sake, it exists out in the world, but what do you really do with it, right? If you take it and form it into information, now you can make a decision on it, right? So I'm always trying to contextualize and make sense of the world around me. And so a lot of the work I do, whether it's like strategic finance or helping people with, just in a musical context, helping them kind of see their vision to fruition, playing the part that I play, right?
Yeah.
I always love watching light bulbs go on, right? And I also like people coming into clarity about what they do, right?
That's amazing.
So it's both creative and critical thinking put together. And I learned at a young age that I could do it, but I didn't realize until my 20s that that was actually something that was valuable to people. I'm like, well, first I do this part of my brain, and then I do this part of my brain. And there was actually a fellow musician of mine who was horrible at administration, as many musicians are, artists, right?
Oh, yeah.
They need somebody to help corral the cats and do the things. Well, I was frustrated with him as a young guy. I'm like, why can't you do these things? And he said, Brian, most people can't switch hemispheres like you do. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And he said, most people can't, they're either creative or they're analytical, and usually they're not both.
Yeah.
And that actually, I had to sit back and think about it because I had just been so used to being me. I didn't realize that most people couldn't. So I kind of found that to be more of my my superpower to be able to switch between those two things.
I love that. I love that. So you just come off working for like Michael Hyatt. I know you're in the healthcare world now, and but you also played bass for a lot of cool people. I've got to get the important things out here first. Like we're fellow bass players,
my homie,
and that's amazing. We talk tone a lot. We talk basses a lot, and definitely going to get you my P bass so you can just hack around on it and check it out sometime.
So I just want to say, like, for people listening. Right. I've loved to get to know you and your lovely wife, Andrea, over time.
I did not put him up.
No. So, so as a young player, right, I remember seeing my friend had the Bloom album by
taking us back. Wow.
And so I've listened to that thing. And at that point, I didn't realize you could drop the low string down to D. I'm like, how is he going down to D? Is he playing? How many strings does he have? But I remember listening to those tones because that sound was something that kind of lodged in my brain. And so depending on what I was playing, I'm like, I want to chase that sound, that sonic space that you inhabited. So it's been a pleasure to get to know you personally.
Well, thank you for saying that. I mean, and we ended up at the same church for a while, and I always, you were up on the stage during worship and stuff, and during the pageantry and all the things. You were just so you could show up and do all the things, and I just love that about you too, man. You're way better than me, by the way. I just go ahead and get that out there.
Let's just do a bass duet. Good for everybody.
That'd be awesome. Keep us on track here, Patrick.
Okay, so I know you've got a lot going on, and we're going to try and get to as much of it as we can.
Of course.
I do want to know a little bit about your podcast, Curiosity Continuum. Can you tell us something about that?
I mean, you said it right. Curiosity Continuum is my podcast. We're in our 7th year at the time of this recording. We're over 300 episodes every week on Monday. Right?
Dang, we should have turned this around, or maybe we got to be on yours.
Well, that logo's blue, so that'll be Project Blue. That'll be the company.
Okay, there we go.
Curiosity Continuum started with my friend Josh and me. So Josh and I have known each other since 2nd grade.
Oh, man.
And we always would riff. We're those lifelong friends. And a few years ago, he said to me, Brian, why don't people know how to solve their problems, right? Now, you got to understand who Josh is, right? Josh is one of the smartest people I know. By the time he was probably 8th grade, he had 10,000 hours of experience doing networking and cabling, built his own computers. Whoa. That was one thing that he did, right? And he decided to go to aerospace engineering for the degree, but he decided to quit because he told his dad said, why are you quitting? You're going to be an aerospace engineer. He said, Dad, it's really clear that college just wants to have me think the way they want me to think. They're not encouraging me to think for myself. So he chose a very different path.
That's awesome.
And as we have those conversations, especially as you've kind of watched the world unfold for the last few years, what you've seen is people hearing something that they want to hear to validate a perspective, and they don't move off of it. Yeah. Or they're finding more ways to hate one another. Right? How can we disagree? Right? What is the one thing that's going to make me just not talk to you or consider your perspective, right? Yeah. And unfortunately, what's happened over the course of time is that we have moved as a society to those realities, right? Yeah. And so what Josh and I wanted to do was create a proof of concept that this is how you talk to people. This is how you start a conversation, right? And this is how you can work around it. And part of being friends was the proof of concept. You can be friends and you can disagree, but you can find your way through. And he had to talk me into doing the podcast. He said, we should do this. I'm like, why would I podcast? I had no idea. We had no idea what we were doing first. When we started, we said, we're going to do it for a year. First, because we wanted to be consistent if we're going to do it. Yeah. And we did. And, those first episodes, that one we recorded 4 times. Finally, before I saw the light of day, we were terrible. I didn't have so many ums and ahs and likes in my life. And oh my gosh, my speech teacher from high school is coming to mind. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get this right. But we practiced it. And, at the end of the first year, we really enjoy this. Yeah. We got really good feedback that, parents were talking to children. You had ways that regardless of your walk of life, you could come and talk about it. So really the themes are contextual awareness, adaptive expertise, right? And kind of exploring the world around you to be able to adapt one thing that you do from one part of your life to another. And I think especially now where we're in the age of an answer, right? AI is making it even easier to just, here's an answer. If that's what you wanted, that's what you got. And it's pretty easy to get to. But I think what's happened is that people have lost how to ask a good question and then be genuinely curious about one another.
I love that.
Wow.
Man, that was a lot right there.
I'm sorry.
I mean,
I think I would tell everyone listening to go check out some of these episodes and dig into this and to download some of that, because that's got to be incredible stuff.
It's only 15 to 20 minutes, so we also did
perfect.
it. So as long as I talk, that's probably half the podcast right there. we wanted to do that, and really, because we live around Franklin, and I was like, how long does it take to go from your house to go run to the grocery store?
Yeah.
It's always like about 15 minutes to everywhere around this place. So I'm like, that's probably good. I could probably cut it there. There's a constraint. It's like musicians. If you say, you get a bunch of people together and say, well, let's jam, and everybody looks at each other for 2 hours, not knowing what to do.
Yeah.
But if you said, we're going to play blues and A, go. Everybody can understand that. They'll at least start with that context, and they can explore from there. But it helps.
I love that.
Frame it.
I love that. So you've been connecting people's work and their purpose a lot too. Yes. That's an idea that I think we'll go back to this thing of how you can kind of swap back and forth between your creative side and your intellectual side. So tell us more about that.
So when I started coaching, I had a desire to help people creatively solve their problems, right? How do you want to build this Lego ship together? I think the thing that I did well in that, after I kind of worked out some of the kinks at the beginning, was that I could see the gaps.
Yep.
Right. And not only see the gap, but then help them interpret what that gap meant. Right. It wasn't a moral judgment of it's good or bad. Yeah. Right. But if it's saying like,
that's important.
I value my time. Right. I'm working too much. Okay. So why are you working too much? Right. You just ask enough questions, you'll kind of understand.
Do you need more people? All the things. Yeah. You help them work through that.
Yeah. And so some of the values that are driving that, you kind of have to understand, what is my default operating system for making that decision, right? Well, I love that. Because this is this way, I feel this way, or I think this way. But then you say, why? Now, sometimes those simple questions take a lot of time to answer.
They do.
Right? Sure. In my own life, I've asked myself why. Sometimes I don't have the answer, and I have to really chew on it to really kind of come to a resolve. If you're willing to do that work, you're in a good position to affect change in your life, right? Because you have to almost understand that the way that you understood things was the best that you had at that time, right? You're trying to make a good decision. Yep. Right? It's like with marriage. Would you ever get married had you known what's going to come at year 15? Probably not. You're going to go in with the best things that you know at that time. Yeah. So what happens when you have to evaluate, what does this mean now? Yeah. Right? You have to, at one hand, understand you're going to grieve something, right? I'm not that person anymore. I'm becoming this person. Because grief isn't necessarily all negative. We usually hear grief when we think there's some terrible thing that's happened. Yeah. It's not all terrible. Grief is just a change of something that is from what's known or what's familiar. Yeah. Right. Wow. And that can be, those are different things that when you run into that, it's like, sometimes that's why it takes a lot of mental bandwidth for people to kind of work through something. Like, why is this decision not easy for you? It's like, because there's all these other things that are kind of running in the background for you to have to process and make sense of. I love that. Wow.
That's so deep. I'd love to know kind of your heart behind that. What's the passion that helped you get into that space?
That's a good question.
Yeah. Some of it was actually by necessity. Okay. Right. So there was I left my full-time work years ago and went to one consultancy where I thought I'll just be part of that group. And that particular situation ended up being a little wonky. So then I was out on my own. I'm like, I want to eat. I like eating,
Provide for your family.
There's good habits.
Take care of things, have a home, do the life, do the things.
Got to do some things. So some of it was like, I have no idea, but I got to figure this out. Oh. And I remember there was sorry, keep hitting this microphone. I'm sorry.
Those are interesting seasons.
I hit up this guy who I met out in Hollywood. He was, runs a not-for-profit and done other consulting and things. And I talked to him. I was in the beginning of year 2. And he said, well, congratulations on year 1. I'm like, that was a dumpster fire of a year. Like, why are you saying congratulations? He said, most people don't make it through year 1.
There you go.
And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Those things I didn't know what I didn't know. Yeah. And so some of it was by necessity. But some of the heart, if I really am looking at it from my vantage point now, I think some of it was trying to discover myself. Because there were things that I had questions about, like, why do I think this way? Why do I want to do this? Why do I feel this need? And I think some of it in the ways of helping others, in a backhanded sort of way, I was discovering parts of me. Yeah. And I think as you get older, you also understand the parts of you that aren't the best parts of you, right? Not, it's just like, good can be the enemy of perfect, right?
Totally.
Sometimes, but it shouldn't be. Like there's parts where I do this really well, but does this serve me the same way in this season as it did before?
Wow.
And maybe no, living in Nashville, I've had a lot of chances to play with wonderfully talented musicians.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like you sneeze in the grocery store, you hit three hit songwriters and, somebody who used to be on the road for 20 years, and they've done all these wonderful things.
Yeah.
Music for me has been in ebb and flow, a very different spot in my life in recent years. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
It's just because that part of my life, there's a season where that has taken it. I'm not all of a sudden not that person.
Yeah.
But,
I can relate to that.
I think part of the discovery also is kind of unhinging your work from who you are. And that's a really hard thing sometimes, especially for men, where there's so much wrapped into your work that you start to lose like a sense of self in that,
Absolutely relate to a lot of that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So, I mean, I'd like to go back though a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you're from Korea but you were raised in America. I think it was up in Minnesota, right? Yeah. Tell us about that whole kind of part of we'll go way back, but then how you feel like that's shaped your whole life here, maybe even who you are today.
Yep.
And then most recently you got to do something really amazing, which I'll let you share about, but I just know that's a big part of your story. I'd love to hear more about that. And I think our listeners would be intrigued to hear that too.
Well, I'm happy to share. So I am Korean. As you can see, I am Korean. So I was born in Seoul.
Okay.
And I was part of the wave of Korean adoptions that happened, especially like in the 70s, 80s. A little bit of history on that first to kind of walk you into before I get to my story, right? After the Korean War, South Korea was devastated. I think they dropped more bombs on South Korea than World War I and II combined.
Wow.
Right? Country was completely just, annihilated. What happened was there was also GIs from the U.S. and other surrounding places that were soldiers there, right? So there were now children of mixed ancestry or ethnicity. So some of the very first adoptees out were like children of GIs, right? In a society in Korea where it was very paternalistic and there was really not as many rights for women to advocate for themselves in that situation, right? You had the social stigma tied to the mother, even if it was the father running around with doing shenanigans, right? More than shenanigans if you're running around. You're gonna have the situation where now, but the woman carries the stigma that you were a single mother, right? You don't have any social infrastructure in the country. Like you are literally a third world country after the war. So the Holt family was from the States and they began to bring some of the first Korean children over. Well, what happened over time is that the Korean adoptions became an industry of itself.
Oh my gosh.
Right? So when Korea hit their industrial revolution, like the late 70s, early 80s, right, they were funding a lot of this by selling children.
Wow.
So there's a lot of investigations now about human rights and trafficking and many other falsifications of records and all that stuff, which I'll get to a little bit more later. But that's some of the things. So the Korean adoption wave actually was the prototype for all international adoptions that happened after the fact.
I was going to say, I have found that to be true, like in so many countries. Yeah, what you just illustrated feels very replicated in a lot of places. Yeah.
We are the oldest group, and you start to see some of the outworking of some of those social constructs that happen, right?
Yeah.
So I was adopted. I was premature. I have no record of my birth mother. I have no record of my birth father. They know I'm 100% Korean. I can, see the hospital where I was born. I could look at the paperwork and stuff. My parents are always very open. My parents are, Swedish, English, and Ukrainian, Polish. So here's a funny story. Right? My name is Brian Shun.
Yeah.
All right. Shun used to be Shunsky. Okay. So the Ukrainian Shunskys came through Ellis Island 4 generations ago from my adoptive dad's side, and to sound less Eastern European because everybody kind of wanted to sound like ambiguous in terms of their nationality.
Yeah.
They dropped ski. So I ended up with an Asian sounding last name, and ain't none of my relatives looking Asian. Let me tell you what. So
that is awesome.
It's kind of funny. I was born Che Kyung Sub, so Che would be my family name. So
say that one more time.
Che Kyung Sub.
Wow, that's cool.
It would look like if you said it like it would be Kyung Sub Choi if you looked at it just from just saying it very plainly. But Kyung Sub is first middle name was always said together, and the family name comes first. And Choi I'm saying it badly because I'm still learning how to speak Korean as part of my journey. You'll twist the vowel a little bit. So it's more like Jay, but when you say it quickly, it sounds like Jay.
Okay.
I'm finding that the Korean language is very sudden sometimes.
Yeah.
Like there's more lead into a lot of like English vowels and consonants, but it's more sudden when it comes to Korean. Anyway, all that to say, grew up in central Minnesota, small town. Most Korean adoptees ended up in small towns, sometimes predominantly religious households. It's because the Lutheran church had a big influence because the Holt family was Lutheran.
Okay.
Right. And so this was some of the influence there. That's why you saw a lot of Scandinavia. You see a lot land in Australia, but we all landed in these towns. And the wisdom of the day when I grew up was that, well, they're just one of the family, right? As you see now, like when you see international adoptions happen, you see a lot of learning about culture, right? You learn about heritage. You learn about all these different things. And honestly, you know, if you look at how God defines the image of who you are, right? We're made in God's image. We're fearfully and wonderfully made. And you look at the end of days and there's all these tribes, tongues, and nations, right? Mm-hmm. Part of the thing that happened in my era of transracial adoption, where the child looks different than their parents, was that you just ignore that part, right? And so, like, if you're a husband, you're a man, you're a father. If I told you, I said, like, okay, be who you are, but you can't be a father now. It's like you wouldn't even know how to process that. You're like, well, but I'm a father.
Part of who you are.
What do I do with that?
Yeah.
Well, as a young child, when you're told like that part of you doesn't matter, right? The child hears, I don't matter, right? And what also becomes the problem is the way that you look, right, is shocking. So there's this thing called race dysphoria, and honestly, until my mid-20s, I was surprised often to see a Korean face looking back at me because I was told that part didn't matter, and that was the problem. So I was always trying to put myself in the context of everybody else that I saw.
Yeah.
I got the question. I've had the privilege to speak at a couple adoptee things now.
Yeah.
They said, did you have any like, Korean figures that you looked up to or, like were inspiring to you? And I was like, no, I didn't. I didn't even know they existed. The closest thing at the time was Mr. Miyagi, and I didn't want to look like Mr. Miyagi. Wanted his skills, but I remember the 1988 Olympics from Seoul.
Yeah.
That was such a cultural thing for me. Wow. I was just transfixed by watching this happen.
I love it.
And I'm like, I didn't quite know what to make of it at the time.
Yeah, sure.
Only in adult life did it start to make more sense.
Yeah.
But part of when I talked about identity earlier, those things are all part of you, right? Yeah. I think the problem sometimes happens when people try to say, I'm only this, right? And you make it important. But the problem is that with anything, whether you say it's my economic class, it's my ethnicity, it's my family situation, it's all that kind of stuff, right? Those things are components, but they are not the only thing. Yeah. Right? See, when you talk about if you are made in the image of God, then that is the ultimate. That's the quintessential thing that ties everything together, right? So in a lot of the journey recently, what's happened is there's been the restoration of the Korean component of my identity. It's like, oh, this is part of me. Now, over time, of course, like through my mid-20s to now, and my mid-40s now, there's different parts of me that have obviously, like, I'm fine with it. I know what it is. But only in the last few years has that really started to crack open with my children. Now I have an 18-year-old at the time of this recording and a 16-year-old. Wow. And they said, well, we're Korean. You don't know how weird that was for me to hear. I'm like,
I love that, though. Isn't that awesome?
And I'm like, and it doesn't bother you. So I said, it bothers me. Why does it bother me? And that started the whole journey. That's a whole other podcast and probably a couple bottles of bourbon to sit and talk about things. But
dude,
anyway,
that's beautiful, Brian. That's beautiful. So, but that led you to a really cool thing, though, that happened recently. Really cool thing. My wife for years, God love her, encouraged me so Amazing
often.
wife.
Amazing wife.
So talented, too. Yes. Very artistic,
Very artistic. Her name is Sabrina, and we've been married almost 20 years now.
Congratulations. That's beautiful.
Sabrina is one of those true nurturing hearts, right? And one of the things that she loved about me was that I was me, right? Yeah. And all the things that it entailed. And so for many years, she was like, I want you to explore your Korean identity. I want you to explore this part of you. This is part of who you are. This is part of our family. Aww. And she was the one that wanted it and prayed for it more actively than I did. I'm like, I'm not looking at that. I'm not interested. it hurt in a place I didn't understand that it hurt.
Yeah.
And so to me, I was like, oh yeah, no, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. But she was very diligent throughout the years.
Oh.
So let's fast forward now to the now times, Will.
Yeah.
The now times.
I love it.
In the now times, I had connected with somebody actually through counseling. So I would encourage people as they work through something to find a counselor.
Amen.
This particular counselor had a Korean adopted son.
Okay.
It was the first session. I said, all right, homie. I didn't call him homie, but basically,
Yeah.
homie, I'm going to stop this session right now because I want to talk to your son more than you, right? I want to know the groups that he's involved in the Tennessee area to start, connect with other Korean adoptees more openly, like actively seeking and not like bumping into somebody.
Yeah.
And so one thing led to another. And I learned about this program called the Overseas Koreans Agency. It's a governmental agency out of Korea.
Okay.
And they will sponsor trips for people to come back
Oh my gosh.
Amazing.
to explore. I'm like, this is a thing? I'm like, I didn't even know it was a thing. Now, there's other organizations
Wow.
like me in Korea, like Goal, these are other organizations we could probably put in the show notes or something like that, right? And it's helping adoptees connect with their Korean heritage, especially around that. But the OKA is a governmental agency. I've been doing it for years.
Yep.
I hadn't heard about it. Didn't even know it was a thing. Well, they said that the trip is about to open up, but there's a very short window to apply. So in the October of 23, when I heard about it, 2 weeks later, the window opened and I found out about it from the person who introduced me to it. I applied and then 2 weeks later said, you're accepted.
Wow.
So I had no time to process what this actually was going to mean.
Unbelievable. Yeah, you sent me your letter you sent to them,
Yeah.
and it was unbelievable.
I mean,
by the way.
if you would have said this is going to happen, I'm like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe someday. It's like, well, someday's coming now and I better get my crap
It's
together.
like a 0 to 1,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
overnight.
That trip I went on by my own, but on solo. I went there solo, and I was there for 9 days. 4.5 days with a program, and the 4.5 I just stayed after.
Very cool.
It changed my life.
What a beautiful
Absolutely changed my
opportunity.
life.
Oh,
What all did you do while you were there?
I ate some good food first. Of
Yeah,
all.
you did.
amazing.
You did.
I want some good food.
Man, I know a place. We'll go.
Oh,
We'll go
yes.
after the show.
I'm
We're
in.
gonna do it.
We're doing that.
One of the things that I did was there was the program showed kind of like it took you to the museum, talked about some of the issues surrounding adoptees, right?
Yeah.
People come in. So I was able to connect with other adoptees as well. The program after the program usually involved going out and finding soju
Yeah.
and, and talking and sharing stories. I found a family.
Oh,
When people were talking, there was adoptee sharing from the stage. His name was Tom Evers. He's from Sweden. He's a few years older than me. One of the things that he said, I identified with a lot of the things he was sharing. He said, growing up, it became easier for me to be an overachiever because people would love me for what I did rather than who I am. So going back to the work I was doing, like I was finding they'll love me because I can do this.
yeah.
Because I've solved this problem. So that adaptation to be able to do those things well, I put in to go like, okay, now love never has to be unconditional.
Yeah.
Right? So this is how this relationship can go.
Wow.
And when he said that, I just sat there and I go like, that's been me.
Yeah.
And that was a really interesting reality to just sit there and go, that's happening. But then as I'm looking around, I'm seeing all these other people from around the world, French adopted Koreans, Scandinavia, England, Australia. This is some of their story. Like we all came into this frame. I don't need to sit and explain my last name. I don't need to say like why I speak English so well.
Yeah.
Depending where you go, it's like, oh, you speak English really well. It's like, thank you. Thank you. Love you, mean it. Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
But we had so many great stories to share. It's like we share this common origin story, right? Even though we don't know how we came into the frame, we're here together. I got a chance to meet one of my foster moms.
Oh.
So one of the most touching things is I went to the agency, understood a little bit more about my file. Mine was pretty small. Some people have a large one. I was adopted when I was a year old. Jongsun is I think 83 now. And
So beautiful.
I was her first foster child to reconnect with after pandemic. Wow. And I found out I was her first foster child. So I got a chance to, I recorded the conversation, and we had a translator there as well. But we shared stories back and forth. I had something pre-translated I wanted to share with her. And then she was sharing a little bit about how I grew up in that family. So I was with her for about 6 months before she had a medical thing where it kind of precluded her from continuing to care for me. So I went to another foster home, but I was with her for the most time.
Yep.
And so I found out I had like 4 siblings that were her biological children that were older than me. And so I'm like, well, that explains why my mom said when we went to friends' houses and they had children that were older, there's this one particular person said, you clung to him like an older brother. And I probably did.
Yeah.
My little self probably went, that reminds me of this guy.
Yeah. Makes sense. I love that.
We shared a wonderfully sweet time. She asked me why my hair was so long. 'Cause, like, if you look at like Korean men, like they rarely have long hair. Yeah. So I'm definitely a Korean American, right? Well, we were ending our time and her phone rang because her daughter was going to pick her up. And I'm like, I know that song. And I said, I know your ringtone. And so I was talking to the translator and it was How Great Thou Art.
Oh.
And obviously I know the melody. Right? As being a musician, you understand those things, but it was sung in Korean.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm a Christian. My family was Christian when we raised you. I want you to know that was part of your young formative life.
Wow.
And you know what? Like,
the Lord looking out for you, Abba, man, right there.
Always and forever. And you know what? That resonated so deeply with me because I came to faith at a young age, growing up in the States.
So cool.
But I think the thing that a lot of adoptees ask is like, why am I here?
Yep.
Right? Even if you had full knowledge of birth parents, is always driving action up to the point. But especially when you don't know, right? It's like, what happened here?
Yeah.
Right? There's no details of it. It's like when you open up a book and it says chapter 3.
Yeah.
But what happened to chapter 1 and 2? It's it's like, wait a minute. No, I'm starting on chapter 3. Like, what happened here, right? Jung-soon was the only person that I've ever met who's known me before the age of 1.
Wow.
And she was able to tell me some of those things. And man, that was like, even like, she's not my biological mother, right? But what a gift that was to understand how God from the beginning and the end is there.
Yep.
You know, I think sometimes when
he knows the plans and he's got you. When he was plotting those out. Yeah.
Honestly, Will, those things in my working out, who am I? What do I believe? Why am I doing the things that I do? Right. I think to see the continuity of God through.
Yep.
That was like an anchor point. Like I could understand that this is truth, right? All the other ways that you would worship and do things like, the songs are loud, the songs are quiet, the songs are this way, or this is how, we follow this plan for the preaching or whatever like that, right?
Yeah.
Those are all nice to haves, but the truth of those things and who God is, that's the true line through all of it, right?
Yep.
And to see that start from there to here, it just, it did a lot for my heart, I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
I love that.
Actually connecting those dots and being able to see evidence of that through that trip. Mm-hmm. So as you came back from that trip and coming to, present time, I'm sure you have so many endeavors and I'm sure you're taking all of that experience with you. I would love to know about what you're working on right now and how that's affected that.
I do want to say that endeavor comes from like Hands and Feet's word.
Yes, it does.
For this year.
Yes.
And so it's like, as we endeavor in Haiti and there's a saying, mountains beyond mountains in Haiti, you climb one mountain to get there. And then you just got to go down the other side and you got to go right up the next, So this idea of staying in the fight and never giving up and all the challenges and all the things like that, so you've certainly, as we've heard your story, a lot of it, you're an example of that. And for you, we gave him the word resolve. And I do think that that's super cool. So maybe in the context of that, you can answer Patrick's question. Yeah.
So what I'm endeavoring to do right now is to seek how I can do the work of the heart and my hands together. Right. So one of the things that I realized when I shared with adoptees, I've written some poetry, so one thing I'm endeavoring to do is create a body of work, right? A short little book on purpose, because oftentimes when you're working through those deep issues, you don't want to sit there to prepare your emotions, to go sit and go through the heavy stuff. Like, you can't do that. Like you need those moments where you can just drop in, like short little snippets. Yeah. Right. So I want to be able to create a body of work for that. So good way through, I got to go through back and edit some of it. So I'm endeavoring to do that.
I love it.
Because I realize that at this stage of my life, I am that person I'm not like the oldest person in the room for adoptees, and I'm definitely not the youngest.
Yeah.
But I offer this perspective now. I'm like the age of a lot of parents for some of the youngest Korean adoptees. Yeah. Honestly, as I've explored more of that, I almost felt guilty that like this touched my heart. Mm-hmm. Like I never associated I could do the work of my heart as my work.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So is it full-time adoption, everything? Not necessarily. But finally, at this point in my life, I have permission to not only tie the work of my hands to the passion of my heart in a different sort of way.
Wow.
Right. And that's okay. Like it should feel like that's a type of rewarding and vulnerability though, that I wouldn't have found because I was too ready just to be guarded. I wasn't allowing that part of me to even, be alive or be explored. And so what I'm endeavoring this year to do is to kind of explore the integration of what a full image for 360 of what that identity looks like. Right.
I love that.
I don't have to ignore it. I don't have to pretend it's not there. And I don't need to pretend like it's all fully formed. I had a lovely Korean woman who's a teacher, teaches language. And she goes, like, what level are you at learning Korean? I go, baby. I said, I'm a baby, right? But I'm okay now to look like the fool in the room.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I love it.
I'll ask, right? And, you can explore a lot of different things, but I'm okay to be in that position.
Yeah.
So my resolve is to be, again, in that seat of, I want to learn, right?
Yeah.
So now these Lego pieces for this part of my identity have come in. How do I want to build that? And so my endeavor this year is to not only offer the skills and things I do just for others, right? I want to be able to say, how does that apply to this part of it? Because that's the best offering when you have a better sense of identity, right? You know who you are. And then you've also not shut off that part of your heart that's most valuable to the world.
Yeah.
So that's the genesis of it. Do I fully know where it's going to go quite yet?
Yeah.
No. But I do know that this is going to be a lifelong journey for me to continue to unfold that.
I love that. That was beautiful.
Yeah, that's resonating with me a lot. Such a different experience, but I grew up overseas and, my culture was from a different country than America. Mm-hmm. Even though I am American, I came back for college and culture shock of just getting here. And I was like, right. Oh, I look like these people. I'm from the same place as these people. I'm not like these people. Mm-hmm. And, I put in over 11 years now and I still feel like I'm figuring it out. So the fact that you're kind of chasing that and working through that, is so impactful for me. And I would love to know for the people that you're surrounding yourself with, what's that first step? If you were going to be with someone and say, okay, you want to figure out who you are, here's the first step you need to take. What would that be?
That's good.
That's a good question. I think for everybody, you need voices that are big in your ears, right? Some people have a very lonely experience, right? So that's hard, right?
Yep.
Can God meet everybody where they are? Sure.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
But to hear voices that you trust and be willing enough to hear it and go, why is that way? If you told me Brian, let's say it was a musical context, right?
Yeah.
You said, you hit it all except for that third song in the chorus, that note, okay, does that mean that you hate me? No. Does that mean that you thought the whole performance was bad?
Yeah.
No. But you would say, if you want to consider something, here's where you would want to focus on, right? And I have to say, well, why did that happen? And how can I make it better?
Yeah.
Right? So one of the things that an older coach taught me is a phrase, I invite you to consider. And what it is, it's literally an invitation to consider these things, right? The person doesn't have to take it, but it's there. And you can lay it out there. And what it does is it's not telling somebody what it is, not telling somebody how to feel, but it's asking that question. Are you willing to ask questions?
Yep.
Right? Rather than give the pat answer.
Yep.
Are you willing to trust somebody enough to be able to say, hey, it could come back and bite you, but what do you see here? Right? And you have to explore why.
Yep. So
having that curious heart is the start.
I love
right?
that.
You're being willing. That means that you don't know everything. It means that you know some things maybe, right? But you're willing to be wrong.
That's fascinating.
If you're willing to be wrong, I think you have a chance to grow.
Wow. And that kind of leads into the word for this episode, resolve. Mm-hmm. In climbing, as we're talking about mountains, it can mean finding the right sequence, but it can also mean resole and staying with the shoes that you're in, even though, you've gone through them and worn them out. So when you find yourself in this process, and what do you do when it looks more like having to repair rather than just progress?
Just to take a personal moment, a lot of this finding out who I am.
Yeah.
Right. Those are operating modes that I carried into my marriage. Right.
Sure.
There were a lot of things where I didn't realize I was even operating that way that hurt my wife.
Yep.
Right. So yeah, I'm doing these things well in terms of my career. Right. These things are happening, but my wife and I we're finding more and more times where I was operating a certain way and it wasn't working for the family.
Yeah.
Right. Now, those were the kind of the quiet moments in the Shun household where this is sometimes lived reality, right? I had to come to the place where my wife says, this has to change some of the ways you operate, why you get so frustrated so quick, right? About this, or why you all of a sudden turn when something's said, right? And I had to be honest with myself. I'm like, I would put up so much armor. I go, yeah, I know this mode, right? But I'm like, I would try to intellectualize everything, but I had to sit here. And I'm like, look, I'm willing to do the work. Right. And I have a gracious wife that's let me do the work and walked with me in that stuff. Mm-hmm. Right. But look, that's not high and mighty stuff. Right. You go, especially with dudes, like, what you doing? Hey, we're doing the mighty good stuff and strong and power, money, things, and you can easily gloss over that. But if you were to say, Brian, do you trust your wife's heart towards you? Mm. Right.
Yes.
It comes here. It's like, have I? I could say, oh yeah, sure I do. It's like, no, I haven't.
Yeah.
But that's not an indication on her. It's on me.
Yeah.
That's been a lot of repair.
Wow.
Right. And I think for anybody who's been in a marriage for any length of time, they live through those seasons. Right. So Rick Kua was another fellow bass player.
Awesome bass player. Yep. Rick. Love him.
Love Rick. He married us, Sabrina.
Oh, right? That's beautiful.
And so bass has been a part of my life all through. But one of the things that him and Diana, his lovely wife Diana, said to us, we asked them, I think at that time they were thinking their third decade of marriage. Now they're, I think, at 50 or something like that.
Unbelievable.
And Diana said, my advice for people to have a long marriage is to stay married. Now I'm like,
that's true.
That's true. And I said, that's a simple answer. But man, when one of the people's going through something or both people are going through something and you're dealing with life, that becomes a more profound
just to stay in there
married.
is
And I'm grateful that I'm still married. I'm grateful that I've had the chance to kind of rip out the dysfunctional, broken places of myself. And is it working 100% yet? No.
Yeah.
Can I practice that for the rest of our lives? Yeah. That's what I want to do. That's the work. So to repair those things, sometimes those things are invisible. Yeah. Especially in the arena that you walk into.
Wow.
That was awesome.
That's so great. I mean, the amount of grace.
I know people out there definitely heard some nuggets in that one. Yeah. That's great. I was resonating and just feeling that one the whole way through.
Oh yeah. A little bit of self-reflection in my own
gosh.
life.
Yeah. I thought you were talking about me. I mean, yeah, you were.
So has resolve in your life ever cost you something?
Yes. I think anybody who's resolved to do something, there's going to be almost like there's narrowing of things you're not going to do.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then there's also a season probably where you'll be unbalanced. As much as people talk about, let's find balance and things like that, right?
Yeah.
If you think about Olympic athletes, those homies own it. They own it and they live it and they breathe it and they do things that that other people won't do.
Yep.
And that means they're saying no, I'm not going to go out with my friends. I'm going to do this thing.
Every yes is a no to something else. That's right. Yeah.
And so is it there's a constant state of equilibrium? No, I think it's feeling this, right? So if I resolve, for example, to pour into my family more.
Yep.
That means that I have to back off of some of the other commitments that are outside the home. Right.
Yep. Okay.
Now, for a guy who said wants to be helpful to others, because that's how I hit my self-worth.
Yeah.
Right. That hurts.
Yeah.
I'm going I don't do that. And I feel like I'm letting people down and they're going to nuke me out the door and I'm never going to be back in the building again. All that kind of stuff. That's not the truth.
Yeah, totally.
But even if it was it worth it because my family is in a better shape?
Absolutely.
That is. So that resolve means that this is more important. This isn't, right? And I think that's the only way that you're going to ever retool something. And it will cost you something.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that that's the cost of the opportunity.
And how do you know which thing holds more value? What's the priority there? I mean,
that's a good question.
For everyone, it might be different. I mean,
I think with some of that, you know, when you look at kind of like your core about what's important to you, right? And like what sits closer to like who you are, right? Everybody has that. I mean, some people's politics goes closer than their walk with Jesus. I'm like going, I don't know if that's the right place for that, but I mean, like you get more indignant about this and that. You have to kind
order your priorities first.
You got to order it and say like, why does it live in this orbit right here?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so as you move those things, like, okay, hits here, does that need to be there?
Yeah.
Because look, we can have stuff creep in. Like, why did this become so important to me?
Yeah.
Or why am I spending so much of my emotional energy on this sideways dynamic? It's like, there's no need.
Yeah.
Right. But it might feel familiar. Oftentimes people stay in dysfunction or the way of doing it because it's comfortable.
Yeah.
Even though it's hurtful or it's like not productive. It's like, well, I know this. I can count on this.
Yep.
Right. But you got to say, why am I counting on it? Like, again, like, it's like, why are you, we're made to live in community, right? I mean, God himself was a community.
Yep.
You know, unity and diversity of the community of the Trinity. It's all right. Like, he's a community in and of itself. That's where we get the idea of relationships.
Yeah.
Right. So how you rebalance those things, it's important that you, did I answer the question right on
Yeah,
that?
no, it's great. I love it.
Okay.
I love it. I use that God as a community idea with our leadership in Haiti just last week.
Good.
And talking about unity, and when God in the Bible talks about the team and the body, we're one body, and the foot and the head and the arm and the hand are all. In Acts it says the lesser is actually to be honored, which is just kind of a foreign concept a lot of times. So it's like, no, you think the brain is more the heart, you know, and it's like, you know, and it's all needed. You can't, none of it on its own stands and makes it work. All of it together makes it work. So I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah. I feel like the idea of being loyal, faithful, and committed to something these days is kind of less, it's trending down. Some people are afraid of, you know, committing to certain things. And, you know, what is it about you that helps you stay committed and maybe knows the difference between when it's being stubborn versus loyal?
Sometimes I don't know.
Good.
But you know,
that's fair.
I was like, I don't know. What did that work? I don't know. Yeah. With stubbornness, I think there's a component of pride.
Okay.
There you go.
Right. Resolve is I'm going to do it, right? And I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it, and you're going to do it because it's you. There's other factors that contribute to that resolve, right? So, like for example, I'm thinking of, I don't know why I don't think much of sports, but when Tiger Woods had to relearn how to swing a golf club, right? Well, he was resolved to be one of the best golfers in the world.
Yeah.
Had he continued to swing the club the way that he had, he would have no knee left.
Yeah.
And he actually had to have his knee worked on and surgery and the things, but then he had to work to learn how to swing it so he wouldn't re-damage it, right? So resolve is saying, I'm going to be the best golfer in the world again, and one of the best, right? Stubbornness should be, I'm going to swing the club even if my knee goes down to the ground and falls and breaks apart and stuff like that.
The old way.
That's how I'm going to do it. That's stubbornness.
Yeah.
And look, I've been guilty of that.
Let
me tell you.
I think we all have.
I've been guilty of that. Probably
the
more
old
times
dog
than I
and
care
new
to
tricks. I mean, all the sayings apply here.
But I'm hoping that my resolve will be like, okay, that's not sacred. Right? There's like an order of things. Like, this is sacred. This is really important. This is like, I like to have it around. This is like meh.
Yeah.
Right? And you got to stop making all the meh at the center of your existence.
Amen,
right?
brother. Wow. That was it right there. I love that. Boom. Brought it. That's killer.
So how would you encourage some people to find the thing that matters? Like the core value?
I think one of the biggest things I've learned recently is that for human beings, we are human beings.
Yeah.
And there's not a single path to get to what you would call a successful life.
Yeah.
Right? There's multiple ways. I think sometimes we can get so locked in that this is the only way it has to be.
Yeah.
Right? Outside of eternal and moral and ethical considerations, right?
Yeah.
There's many paths to do it.
You're so fed an American dream, though. And I was just talking about this with my family last night. My mom and dad, I don't feel like they found the American dream. Therefore, their life didn't amount to much. Therefore, they just kind of lived a life of, trying to just disappear drink and smoke and do the things that just made them forget, and not have to face it, which, led to an early death for them. And I think, you're kind of sold a lot of things, especially in your youth and then into your high school. And then you're, back in our day, it was, you got to go to college, and it's obviously changing over time, but, you're kind of sold by culture a lot of times,
We're seeing a lot of those things break now, especially with access to information and different things. Why is this way?
Yeah.
Again, and who told you that was the way that your life needed to go?
Yeah.
Right? And you go, oh, I actually just recently learned, why did I not pay attention to this type of thing in my life? Is because
absolutely.
My dad didn't make it important. Why didn't my dad make it important?
Yeah.
Because I'm it is important to me.
Yeah.
But it wasn't to him. And so you almost adopt those sensibilities.
Yeah.
Both my wife and I grew up in the Midwest, and we've talked about the pros and the cons of a Midwest sensibility.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
It's this serves me really well here. This is crap nugget supreme when you talk about it's serving me over here for what I want to do.
Yeah. You got to make those choices. Yeah.
As I get older, I want to live in the city.
Yeah.
Right. I'll have country places, I'm sure, but I want to be in the middle of it where I can walk. That
That's
sounds
awesome.
exciting. Some people, I want to be the farthest out possible.
Yeah,
right?
me and my wife are probably those people.
Yeah.
We're out in the boondocks.
I'll come visit you guys.
Yeah. Oh, please.
But if you told me, Brian, when in 10 to 15 years, or whatever like that, you can have a place in Seoul and you can walk everywhere, and that's one of your places that you can go, having places and places. I mean, that sounds great.
That's amazing.
Right? Because it's a different adventure.
I love that dream. Yeah. That's so cool.
So I guess the thing that I can be vulnerable to is comparing my journey to somebody else's.
Yeah.
It's really, really, even though somebody's story, it went this way, and sideways and stuff. Sometimes the current felt emotion seems very big, And
Say that again.
The current emotion makes something seem big when it's not as big.
There you go. This current felt emotion. I got
the current felt emotion
I
love
it.
It must be nice if your car didn't break down last week. It's it hurts to pay for a car.
Yeah.
You see somebody driving a nice shiny car. It's maybe that, but it's I've been in those shiny cars and going this thing broke and I had it towed away. They have the same problems.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? But it's very easy to start to go, well, this is better because it's not you.
Yeah.
And that's something though that you really look at and go maybe why am I perceiving it that way?
Yeah.
Right. But also I think the important thing is the emotion. You have your emotions and you have the way that you're thinking about it. They're both important, right? The biggest thing I had to learn in why do I would be envious of somebody else's success, or would I think somebody's better, or all those different kinds of things. You can have an authentic emotional experience about a lie.
That's very true.
It does not diminish the authenticity of that emotional impact. If somebody told me that your dog got hit by a car and died, I would grieve. I love my dog.
Yeah.
But if somebody said, wait a minute, that wasn't your dog. They come find me 5 hours later because, trying to figure out how to get from work or something like that. It's actually not your dog. It's somebody else's dog, unfortunately, right now. It's very unfortunate for the people who lost the dog. But I would be man, I was wrung out.
Yeah.
Right? But I think often it's easy, especially for the people like me, that way I'm wired, be oh, it doesn't matter. It's fine. It's I thought my dog was dead, bro.
Yeah.
The old Brian would have been it doesn't matter. It doesn't match up to truth. But the nature of truth and the authentic emotional thing, it doesn't mean that the truth changed that my dog was or was not hit based on that feeling.
Yeah.
But that component is something that is uniquely human that we do have to account for.
It hit you. Yeah,
in the calculus of life.
Amazing.
Is that the type of stuff that you're diving into with your writing? How are you finding those vulnerable parts in life? Is that what you're trying to tackle?
I wrote a poem called My Looks, which I was about kind of growing up the way I did and putting adult words to a childhood experience and using limited vocabulary. Part of it was because children have limited vocabulary, but I also wanted other Korean adoptees around the world where English wasn't as much of a known language. Could they understand the intent of it, right? So, but that poem was deeply personal. And I'm like, I'm putting myself out. I mean, like, feels like y'all walking naked up on the stage, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, if you're Flea for Red Hot Chili Peppers, you do walk naked on stage.
Oh, whoa.
He's getting a little old for that.
I remember that. I remember that.
But that was what people connected with. Again, and I think that, to go back to the earlier comment, I am beginning to learn that people want to know me, not just what I can do for them. And again, that's learning a different cadence, learning how to swing my golf club a little bit differently and how I think about it.
I love it.
Man.
So cool.
It's almost hard to accept that someone might want to just know you for you.
Right. I mean, really, like, you want this?
But that's beautiful. And that's what we all want, though, right?
We do. Yeah. We crave it.
Deeply.
We want to be known.
Yeah, we want to be known. Yep, that's awesome. I'm thinking of like my kids right now, and my oldest son, him and his new wife, and how they just took off as young marrieds, and they built their little camper bus, and they took off and traveled around the world, and
so fun.
And Andrea and I looked at ourselves, and they're like checking things off their bucket list, and we're like, man, what did we do when we we left the home, we went to college, we got our degree, and then we I would say supernaturally got directed into music, but I was going to be a teacher. She was in business, and we started, looking at the house, paying the bills, and having kids, and I mean they're out in their bus, and they're like, just going to cool places and like hanging out and doing all the things. Do you think that is that today's kind of movement versus our era, or is that just maybe something that they may have got, because Andrew and I were pretty campy and pretty, we moved about quite a bit too with them, but
I would imagine that you guys had a good influence on their sense of adventure in life, or even the things where maybe like, Dad's just paying the bill, what the heck, maybe they had to choose their own adventure in that way to say, this is how I want to engage. I think like for when I look at my children and the adventures they want to go on, it is differently aligned than the world is now. I think every generation looks at the new generation to say, oh my gosh, how is this world going to continue? Well, it obviously has.
Yep.
It's just changed. There's a really interesting book called The Fourth Turning. It's a little dry to read, but what it talks about is like the cycles of human history, right? Oh. And it's based around the saeculum, which is like the about 100 years, right? That was what the Romans called like a good long life.
Yeah.
And it's spring, summer, fall, winter. And if you start to like look at like the patterns of civilization and history, like we're kind of in the winter phase right now of the American experiment, right? We're in a winter season, right? And the winter season is kind of marked by like the constructs that we knew and the leaders that we knew have passed away. They're crumbling. There's like, doesn't look like there's much life around, right? But out of that comes the leaders of tomorrow, comes the innovation, right, which brings forth the spring.
Yep.
And now it's a new era of something. It will not look like the winter.
Yeah.
Right. But in this phase, I think everybody can say with pandemic and, the way that technology is even going parabolic with AI and other innovations and Elon trying to go to Mars.
Yeah.
This world will not look the same in 20 years.
Not at all.
It's rapidly changing.
If we look at even the course of history, the innovation that's happened in the last 120 years, and then you look at the last 20 years, like it's parabolic.
Yeah.
Right. And so we've lived lifetimes at this phase of life.
Yeah,
and our children are coming into this point now where the things that were tough aren't tough. Right.
Yep.
It's like, do you have to worry about, I say this, and I mean no disrespect where people have this, but like for Franklin, Tennessee, right? There's a lot of families that they don't have food insecurity. There's obviously food insecurity that exists in the county and other surrounding places. Ministries like Grace Works and things help people with food insecurity.
Yeah, love Grace Works.
Love Grace Works. I'm on the board for them. I love the mission and everything. But like at least for my family, like I didn't have to worry about where my food was coming from.
Yeah.
Right. I was able to go to college. So those considerations weren't the same for me as it was for somebody else. But I think sometimes what happens is when things become too easy, right? Especially in the world of men, right? The hard world creates strong men. Right?
There you go.
Who create
I
peace,
love this quote. Yep.
Right? Who then create a better world, right? And then here comes ease and convenience, right?
Yep.
But that creates weak men.
Yep. Soft men. Yep.
Right. Which then creates a bad world. That's it. It's the cycle.
Yeah.
Right. Now, hopefully, I will be counted at the end of my days like Brian was one of the strong men.
Yeah.
I love it. That changed.
I know you will.
Well, thank you.
I know you will.
I'll call you and say, Will, tell me, man. Help me, bro. Be the voice of my ear.
That's cool. So for anyone who's been just like listening to this conversation out there, I mean, just to try to bring it home here, yep. I mean, how would you encourage them to, you know, we're talking about resolve, we're talking about our endeavors. I mean, you've been entrepreneurial, you've started things, you've helped people develop things. You've done so much. You've played bass, you've supported musicians, you've supported churches. I mean, I could just go down the list. You worked with Andrea and I. You know, I can remember those hard questions you talk about that you're supposed to ask yourself, and you made me ask them to myself. I didn't like it so much, but you know, these different stages, and you've been on your amazing awakening and all those things, but just how would you encourage someone to go to the places that you feel like God's taken you that were really good for you?
I would, I think about Joshua when Moses died, right? So be strong and very courageous. Yep. Said it 3 times because you need to hear it 3 times.
Yes.
It's like, this is important. Be strong and very courageous. I'll also flip it, right? I'll just say, it's going to suck. It's going to appropriately suck. If you don't expect it to go perfect, then you're in a good spot to do it, right? For entrepreneurs, I tell them the story of like playing catch with my son when he was a toddler, right? And he's got the ball. He's like, Daddy, I'm going to throw it real big. And he threw the fire out of that thing. I had no idea where that thing was going to go.
Yeah.
Sideways, backward. It might go right to me. I don't know. Right. But if that is your understanding, like this is a toddler throwing a ball. Mm-hmm. I have no idea. Right. Just know that, first of all.
Yeah.
The second thing I would encourage people is to have, again, the contextual awareness and how can I adapt what I know for right now? I think some people think like, I don't know how to do that because I know this. It's like, well, you learn principles, even if like, you know, you're not going to make wagon wheels anymore. Like you know how to work with wood, you know how to work with your hands. This is how these things go together, right? You could build these things. Yeah. You can retool those things. And I think adaptivity is going to be the thing that is going to differentiate people like in their career or things now, is because technology is continually subsuming things that are repetitive, things that, you know, make life easier. Yeah. But what makes you essentially human? What makes you that piece that cannot be removed? That skill set won't look the same as it did for my parents, for us, you know, for your children, it won't look the same. But what is that distilled down? Because that is a flexible expression then in career, in family, right? Where you live, how you do your life, right? If you're willing to say, like go on the journey of understanding who you are, right? Holding a view of like an open hand of these are the skills and how does this adapt to the current world? Yep. I know it's going to suck, right? You're not going to get it right. I've been poor at having a working grace for those things, but say, okay, I'm allowing myself room to operate, right? I have this margin of grace for whatever it may be. Yep. Right. And I'm going to get up tomorrow and do it again. Yep. And find people that will encourage you in that. Yep. Not everybody that's your friend now will be your friend 5 years from now. Yep. Will be your friend 10 years from now. Right. It doesn't mean that they're bad friends. It doesn't mean that they're terrible people. It just means that the direction you're going, you need the team that will go with you. Right. Yeah. That support thing, and know how those relationships are defined then.
I love it. I was just at a couple of our Hands and Feet students graduated this last couple of weeks, and one of the graduation, a pastor got up there and started to speak, and he was telling 20-somethings, if you can find your identity right now in your 20s, you'll be on the road to help your 30s, 40s, and 50s. But if you take all of your 20s to wrestle with the world and your culture and your people and all the things, it won't be well until your 40s that you figure out your identity. So I thought that was just a beautiful thing. And I think that's something, I was late finding my identity. And I don't know, maybe if you in your story, it sounds like maybe it was for you too, but to key in on the author of all that we know, you know, the creator and author of everything, God, and to understand our identity in him frees us up, gives us that confidence, as you would say, to kind of have that firm foundation. You know, so many things in the Bible are just popping out, you know, building your house on the sand or building it on the foundation. But, you know, those key foundational pieces that will set your course right. So I love that. I love all that. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, what a joy.
Thank you for having me on this pod. This is awesome.
Yeah,
oh, man.
What we like to end on usually is just, we want to know how we, as well as anyone listening, can pray for you and your upcoming endeavors.
Okay. As mentioned, you know, I'm exploring these parts of Korean identity.
Yeah.
And the prayer would be a little bit broader. It would be, you know, help Brian to understand the work of the heart.
I love it.
And how he can use those ways to connect it to the work of his hands, right? And step out into that, and to allow myself to continue to give myself permission to connect those two things, right? That's still a new muscle that I'm trying to flex. Yeah, get in that groove and doing those things. So that would be those things, that the wisdom that would come from that would be something that I would be able to understand how God is moving Brian and the whole Shun family along. But in this journey, what does that begin to look like in the outworking of the next 3 years, 5 years, right? I would imagine that my life would look very different with that particular context. And that feels scary. That feels scary when you start to do this, because this starts to feel a little bit more unpredictable. Yeah,
but you're not in control completely. You don't know where it may go. Yep.
But understanding who God is through those things would also be that way to buttress it, because that's the true line through everything.
I love that.
That's beautiful. And
Brian Shun, everybody, that was awesome.
Thank you so much.
Wow.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you. That was so cool.
That was such a great episode of Project Red with Brian Shun.
I love Brian. I love Brian. We were so blessed to have him on Project Red. That was amazing.
Yeah, amazing story. And I'm hoping that all of you got so much out of it.
Yeah.
A little update. At Hands and Feet Project, resolve isn't just a word. It's how we're surviving and how we serve. It shows up in the caregivers who are staying through the night with a sick child.
Yes.
It's in our staff who keep showing up, paycheck or not. It's the young adults who dare to imagine something different for their future.
That's right.
So when you're stepping into our story here at Hands and Feet Project, you're not giving to a charity. You're stepping into legacy.
And we've seen this firsthand. Recently, 2 of our students just graduated college here in the U.S. I mean, what an accomplishment. And that doesn't just happen. You know, that wasn't luck. That was their resolve to go through the hard work, to get the grades, to show up every day. They were in sports, played soccer, all the things. And so they did amazing things there. But they also had the people who supported them and did all the things and come alongside them. So thank you to our Hands and Fit team and our huge donor people out there, people who have supported and made donations for them. That was just incredible. And we also had a girl recently who just walked through a ton of years of healing, and she would get baptized. So again, that's not because anyone asked her to, or because she was coerced or anything like that. This was something that she was ready for, and she made the decision. So that's Rochelle's story, and you can check that out in the notes. That's just a beautiful thing when someone comes to know Jesus Christ as their Savior and their Lord. But, those moments don't come out of nowhere. They're built on long, slow work. People sticking in the fight and hanging in there, and the people that are around them not giving up on them. And so that's been really cool. So we've loved all the supporters out there. And we love that so many people haven't given up on the fight, and they've hung in there, and they've resolved to make amazing changes and finishes in their life. So.
Yeah. And if you've ever wondered what it looked like to be a part of that resolve, this is it. It's when you give, it's when you sponsor, or even when you shop our project essentials. You're putting food on tables, you're keeping classrooms open, and you're walking alongside all of these families who are doing everything they can to stay together. So don't overthink it. Pick a child, one gift, one need. You can show up today. You don't have to overcomplicate it. You just have to be there and be a part of this.
I love it.
This is what Resolve looks like here at Hands and Feet Project. So go to handsandfeetproject.org and you can take that next step.
I love it. Thank you for joining us on Project Red.
Thank you so much.